What is happening, YouTube? I hope you're all doing well. You're watching Garside TV, and today we're going to talk about the serial killer Ed Kemper, also known as the Co-Ed Killer. Ed Kemper earned the nickname the Co-Ed Killer for the murder of 6 young female students in California in the 1970s. However, he began his homicidal career by murdering his own grandparents and ended it by murdering his own mother and her best friend. His parents split in 1957 when Ed was just 9. Missing his dad, he became emotional and clingy. Fearing he might become a homosexual, his mother tried toughening up young Ed by making him sleep in the basement with a heavy table over the trapdoor leading to it. A visit from his father put a stop to that, but Ed continued to complain that his mother was an alcoholic and constantly bitched and screamed at him. Clearly, this had an effect on him. He buried alive the family cat, then dug it up, cut off its head and stuck it on the end of a stick, keeping this grisly relic in his bedroom. Asked why he had done it, he said it had transferred its affections to his 2 sisters, and he killed the cat to make it mine, as he said. On a visit to New York, he tried to jump off the top of the Empire State Building, but was restrained by his aunt. At school, Kemper was an outcast. He would annoy the other kids by sitting and staring at them silently. Although he was a big child, he was branded a weakling and a coward and excluded from the games. His little sister, Aline, was upset when he started cutting up her dolls. Soon he began to fantasise about killing people, mainly women, cutting them up and keeping the body parts as trophies. Kemper's mother could not cope with his disturbed behaviour and sent him to live with his dad, who had remarried. When his stepmother found him no easier to handle, his father took him to live with his own parents on their isolated farm in California's Sierra Nevada mountains. There, his grandfather taught him to shoot, but was otherwise dull company. His grandmother was bossy. Ed said, my grandmother thought she had more balls than any man and was constantly emasculating me and my grandfather to prove it. That's what Kemper said about his own grandmother. I couldn't please her. It was like being in jail. I became a walking time bomb and I finally blew. He went on to say. Kemper's first kills, very much a family affair. One day, in August 1964, he was going out of the house with his rifle when his grandmother told him not to shoot any birds. He turned and shot her twice in the head. When his grandfather returned from a shopping trip to Fresno, he shot him too. Kemper was just 15 and did not know what to do next, so he phoned his mother, who told him to call the local sheriff. Kemper told the sheriff that he had killed his grandmother because he wondered what it would feel like to shoot her. He had then shot his grandfather so that he wouldn't have to learn that his wife was dead. Sort of like a mercy killing in Ed's mind. Diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic, Kemper was then sent to the Atascadero State Hospital, a secure facility for the criminally insane. It specialised in sex offenders, and Kemper attended group therapy sessions with rapists. They had been caught because their victims had testified against them. It was better, he soon learned, not to leave the victims alive. At the age of 20, Kemper was released to a halfway house and complained that he did not get help from his parole officer to help him reintegrate into society, which had changed radically in the 5 years Ed had been locked away. He was still steeped in the Second World War values of his father and the conservative 1950s ethos concerning discipline and conformity. Now, people his age were taking on the police in civil rights and anti-Vietnam War demonstrations. Ed said, when I got out on the street, it was like being on a strange planet. People my age were not talking the same language. I had been living with people older than I was for so long that I was an old fogey. He reserved particular contempt for hippies, especially the long-haired young women who hitched rides in cars with strangers. After 3 months, Kemper was released into the custody of his mother, who was then an administrative assistant at the University of California at Santa Cruz and living in the nearby town of Aptos, California. Ed said, "She was Mrs. Wonderful up on the campus, had everything under her control. When she comes home, she lets everything down and she's just a pure bitch. Busts a butt being super nice at work and comes home at night and is a shit." In short, they did not get any better than they had done before. "She loved me in her way, and despite all the violent screaming and yelling arguments we had, I loved her too," Ed said. "But she had to manage your life and interfere in your personal affairs," he went on to say. She wanted him to go to college and get a degree. He preferred to hang out at local bars, particularly one called the Jury Room that was frequented by off-duty cops. He applied to join the police, but was rejected because, at 206 centimetres, that's 6 feet 9 inches, he was too tall. Instead, he got a job manning a stop-go sign for a state roadworks gang. He bought a motorcycle with his wages, but soon crashed it, injuring his head. With the insurance payout, he bought a 1969 Ford Galaxy. His job gave him the money to move out of his mother's place, along with a good knowledge of the back county roads, which he cruised in his spare time, picking up young female hitchhikers and trying to make himself pleasant and agreeable. Ed said, "At first I picked up girls just to talk to them, just to try to get acquainted with people my own age and try to strike up a friendship. Soon, Kemper began fantasising about raping the young women he picked up, but was afraid he would get caught. Clearly, he would have to murder them afterwards. This would also satisfy the bloodlust he had from childhood." Kemper put a great deal of effort into planning his crimes. He had learnt to spot potential victims at a distance so that he did not have to turn back or make any sudden manoeuvres that would draw attention to his car. He already knew that there were more hitchhikers on the roads at weekends and that young women were more likely to get into his car when it was raining. When he had finished with them, he would dump their bodies in some remote spot. He had come across many while working with the road gang. Kemper decided that nothing must connect him to his victims. He resolved to keep none of their possessions, nor any of the weapons he had used in the commission of the crime. It was also necessary to be in control at all times, so he would never go out on the hunt for prey when he was upset or angry, particularly after a row with his mother. Ultimately, however, he broke all of these rules. Even so, the police had no clue to the identity of the co-ed killer until he gave himself up. Early 1972, Kemper began buying knives and borrowed a 9mm Browning automatic from a friend. Then it was time to get out on the road. His first 2 victims were 18-year-old Fresno State College co-eds Mary Ann Pesh and Anita Lacasa, who he picked up on the afternoon of the 7th of May 1972 with the intention of killing them. When he pulled off into a wooded area, side road near Alameda, they asked him what he was doing. In reply, he pulled the gun from under his seat. Intending to take them back to his apartment to rape them, he put Anita in the boot of the car. Meanwhile, Mary Ann was placed in the front passenger's seat with her hands handcuffed behind her back and a plastic bag over her head. When she struggled, Kemper panicked and stabbed her, then slit her throat. Then he went round to the back of the car and opened up the boot. As Anita got out, he stabbed her repeatedly until she fell back into the boot. He threw the knife in after her. Satisfied they were dead, Kemper's only regret was that he had not raped them first. Back at his apartment, he photographed and then dismembered their naked bodies. He then had oral sex with Mary Ann's severed head. The remains of their bodies were dumped in the boondocks, though he kept their heads for some time. Later, he would return to Mary Ann's dumping ground. Kemper said, "Sometimes afterward I visited there, to be near her, because I loved her and I wanted her." This is what he said. A few months later, her head was found by hikers, and she was identified from dental records. Nothing Anita Lacasa's head nor her body was ever found, and the trail of the killer soon went cold. But he was not far away. From the contents of the girls' handbags, he had their addresses and liked to drive past their houses, imagining the grief their families were suffering inside. Following a motorcycle accident, he broke his arm and had to have a metal plate inserted. During his convalescence, Kemper spent time trying to get his juvenile record deleted. Having a conviction for murder made it difficult to buy a gun. On the 14th of September 1972, 15-year-old Aiko Koo was waiting for the bus in University Avenue in Berkeley when a Caucasian male stopped and picked her up. In the car, he pulled a gun. Out in the mountains, he taped Aiko's mouth and pinched her nostrils until she suffocated. Then he raped her dead body and put it in the boot. He stopped for a beer and could not resist opening the boot to gloat over the body. Kemper said, "I suppose as I was standing there looking, I was doing one of those triumphant things too, admiring my work and admiring her beauty. And I might say admiring my catch like a fisherman. I just wanted the exhilaration over the party. In other words, winning over death. They were dead and I was alive. That was the victory in my case." After visiting his mother, Kemper dismembered Aiko in his apartment, dumping her body in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Again, he kept her head for a few days, storing it in the boot even when he went for an assessment by court psychiatrists. For Kemper, cutting off his victims' heads was the best bit. He said, "I remember it was very exciting. There was actually a sexual thrill. It was kind of an exhilarating, triumphant type thing, like taking the head off a deer or an elk or something. Like a hunter. I was the hunter and they were the victims." After his motorcycle accident, Kemper was unable to work, so he returned to live with his mother and to the jury room bar where the cops were discussing the missing girls. On the evening of the 7th of January 1973, he drove up to the Santa Cruz campus where he picked up 19-year-old Cindy Schall and pulled a gun on her. Forcing her into the boot, he shot her in the head dead. His mother was out when Kemper got home, so he hid Cindy's body in a cupboard in his bedroom. In the morning, when his mother had gone to work, he sexually assaulted Cindy's corpse, then dismembered it in the bathroom, leaving the head in his closet. He put the other body parts in bin bags and threw them over a cliff in Monterey. The next day, one of the bags washed ashore, and enough of Cindy's body was recovered for her to be identified. So Kemper learnt in the jury room. In panic, he dug the bullet out of Cindy's head and buried her head in the garden. On the 8th of January 1973, he had a row with his mother. Fuming, he returned to Santa Cruz campus where he picked up 24-year-old Rosalind Thorpe and 23-year-old Alice Liu. While driving, he pulled a gun and shot both of them dead. He drove on with their bodies in the boot. After his mother had gone to bed, he cut off their heads, then raped Alice Liu's headless corpse. Their bodies were dumped in a canyon in Northern California. From the cops in the jury room bar, he learned that a full-scale hunt was on. Knowing that he was bound to get caught, he decided to spare his mother the guilt and shame. In the early morning of the 21st of April, 1973, Kemper crept into her bedroom and slit his own mother's throat. He cut off her head and raped her headless corpse. Then he cut out her larynx and shoved it down the garbage disposal unit. Kemper said it seemed appropriate. As much as she'd bitched and screamed and yelled at me over so many years, I took her voice. He decided to tell her work colleagues that his mother had gone away. To make this more plausible, he made out that she had gone with her friend Sally Hallett, who had already murdered as part of his cover story. Then he got into his car and made a run for it. But when he reached the town of Pueblo, Colorado, Kemper realised that flight was futile. Stopping at a phone booth, he called the police and confessed. They thought it was a crank call at first, until he got through to a cop he knew from the jury room bar. In custody, Kemper made a full confession. The public defender's insanity plea was rejected by the jury, who found him guilty on 8 counts of murder on the 8th of November 1973. Ed Kemper was sentenced to life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. So there you are, guys. That is the story in a nutshell of serial killer Ed Kemper. I hope you enjoyed this video. Found it very informative and enjoyed listening. I'll see you soon, guys. Remember, take care.